Okay, so we did compound interest the other day. Most of it is just calculator stuff, okay? So, our formula is this. We got P1 plus this RN to the NT. That's our formula that we use to find compound interest. Okay, what is P? What is P?
The big number.
It is. It's the number that you're depositing. Isaiah, put that up. The number that you deposited in the account, okay? This is the money deposited. Okay, what about the R? What is the R? It's the
percentage.
It's the percentage, okay? And we're just kicking it in layman's terms, but it's the rate, okay? But this is going to be the percent that you need to turn into a decimal. Okay, and how do we do that? How do we turn something into a decimal?
You move the comma, the dot.
You got to move the dot. How many
Two
places?
spaces.
2 places to
the
the
left.
to the left. Okay, what's the N? What's the N stand for?
The number of years.
Yeah, so it's the number of times, and the way to explain this in layman's terms, okay, if we look at our money, and 3 times a year would be every 4 months. Every 4 months, they look at how much money you have in your account, and they times that by the percent. And then the next 4 months later, they look at that, how much money is on the account, and they times that, okay? And then, so each time they do that, you have a little bit more money in there, a little bit more money in there, okay? And so when it's compounded, it grows over that amount of time. So they check your account 3 times a year. That's what that means, okay? So this is the compound, okay? And then what about T? What's T stand for? Rodney, you better put that up. I don't care.
Time.
Okay, it's the time. Time of what?
Time. A year. Or time.
Hmm?
It's the balance after
It's the balance after so
so many years.
many years, okay? Or it's the time that we let the money sit in the account, okay? So it's the number of years, essentially, that we didn't touch the money. Okay, now, I want you guys to take all of you, go to that very last page. Because some of you guys are going to work ahead, which is totally fine. Go to that very last page. Trey, you hard hearing? What you doing on iPad? Yeah. Okay, so these are some things that I want you to be thinking about. Okay, 25 through 30, which is the very last page. Okay, it says, which option would you do? So on all these, we go through different scenarios, and I say, and I use smaller amounts of money. So when you guys get a job, okay, and you get that first tax check, okay, you're going to get probably about $1,000 on your taxes, okay? When the next year and you get a little bit older, you're probably going to get like $2,000. When you're like an adult, you get around between $5,000 and $15,000 to $20,000 back on your taxes, okay? And even more if you have kids, okay? So I'll probably get about 15 grand back on my taxes, okay? But for you guys that have just started working, you're probably going to get around $1,000. So we're going to go through different scenarios and say, well, what if it was this interest rate? What if they checked it 4 times a year? What if they checked it 3 times a year? What if they checked it 5 times a year? Okay, so on 25, it says, which option would you do? Write down that number of problem. Okay, so as you start working through these, think like, oh, I think I could deposit $1,000 for and not touch it for 10 years or 20 years, whatever. Okay, it says, why did you choose this option? Okay, you need to think about, could I leave my money alone for 20 years? I couldn't. I don't think 20, I mean, I could. I haven't touched my daughters and it's been in there for 8. Okay, and I put money in there all the time. So if you put it into an account that you never see it, so mine's not linked to my normal bank account. I check my bank on my phone all the time. Mine's not linked. I don't have the mobile set on there because I think I would probably spend it. Okay. Do you think that you'd be able to get the initial deposit? What's the initial deposit mean?
The money you taking out.
The money that we put in initially. So do you think that you would be able to get that initial $1,000 deposit? Okay. Do you think you'd be able to leave the money alone, i.e. not spend it in the account for that period of time? So if you picked option 1, if we said, well, I would do option 1, okay, do you think you would not be able to touch it for 10 years? okay? What would you do with all the money saved over the years? Okay, that you can fill out. Okay, and then 30 says write me a deposit amount. So you pick the amount, okay, and the time period. So maybe 10 years, 5 years, 1 year that you could let your money sit and not touch it. Okay, a goal, so to speak. Okay, so that's what you need to do on the back page. Now, some of these are not going to be ideal, but I don't want you to think, what could you do right now? I want you to think, when I'm 18, I could probably not touch, because none of you guys have a job right now, okay? Some of you guys might have onesie-twosies might, okay, but you don't have like a legitimate job. So I want you to think, in the next 5 years, could you deposit that amount of money and not touch it, okay? And a lot of things change over 5 years, okay? But I do have seniors that have an account set up and they have not touched it. Okay, they're saving for a car or whatever. So let's look at the very first one. And I'm going to do some of these on the board with you. But the very first one, it says you deposited $1,000. So we're going to say $1,000 for our P. 1 plus, what's our rate? 3%. And we move that decimal, so it's going to be 0.03 over compounded how many times? 3. And then we got NT. So my N is what? My N is 3. What's my T? 10. Okay, and so it's really 3 times 10, which is going to be 30. Okay, you cannot type in this part to the exponent 3 times 30 on the calculator. Okay, you have to put the 30 first. Okay, so type in all that in the calculator, see what you get.
Where's your intern?
I don't know. What are you going?
300.
I don't know. Just take it. I can't give you that. I don't know. Look somewhere. What'd you get? $1,300? No. 1,347. 28 cents? 0.84. Did somebody else get that too or no? Okay. So, what is this saying? If you had to explain this problem to me, what is it saying? They deposited how much? $1,000, and they didn't touch it for 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, they had... So, how much money did they gain? Over 10 years, they're not touching it. 347. That's not really that much. Okay? And so things are going to change as you tweak the interest rate and the number of times it's compounded along with the number of years. Okay? The longer we leave it, the more money it's going to have. The higher the percentage, the more money it's going to have. The more times it's compounded a year, the more money you're going to have. So when you guys go through and you pick an account, okay, the higher the numbers, the more money you're eventually going to get. Okay, so let's see this other one. You deposited $1,000.